Imagine a courtroom where a smug white judge mocks a black teenager, thinking she's out of her depth. But what happens next leaves everyone speechless. The courtroom was unusually tense. The judge, an older white man with a smug expression, leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen on the desk. His eyes scanned the black teenager standing before him, barely concealing his disdain. She wore a simple suit, her posture straight and her gaze unwavering. But to him, she was just a child, out of her league and wasting the court's time. With a condescending tone, he asked, "Miss, are you lost? This isn't a school debate competition." His comment drew quiet chuckles from the audience, a mix of disbelief and amusement. To them, it was unthinkable that someone so young and black could have any legitimate business in this courtroom. The teenager's calm demeanor didn't waver, but the tension in the air grew heavier. As she began to speak, the judge interrupted her, raising his hand dismissively. "You're not even old enough to vote. What makes you think you belong here, arguing a case in my court?" His voice dripped with arrogance, and the words stung with their implied meaning. It wasn't just her youth that he found offensive. It was her race, her presence, her audacity to stand there and challenge the status quo. The problem wasn't just the judge's attitude, it was the entire system he represented. This wasn't the first time someone like him had dismissed someone like her. The courtroom was supposed to be a place of justice, but for many black individuals, it felt like a battleground where the odds were stacked against them before they even walked in. Every gaze in that room carried an unspoken judgment. Every murmur reinforced the narrative that she didn't belong. Adding to the challenge, the case itself wasn't a minor one. It involved high stakes, a legal battle over a property dispute with powerful opponents. The opposing attorney, a seasoned professional who had likely been practicing law for longer than she had been alive, smirked in amusement. His confidence wasn't just about his experience. It was fueled by the same assumptions the judge held. She couldn't possibly be capable of standing up to him. The teenager's family sat in the back, their faces filled with quiet determination. They knew what she was up against. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about proving that she deserved to be there at all. For her, this wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her, but it was one of the most public and humiliating instances. The whispers from the gallery only amplified the challenge, as people speculated about how quickly she would fail. The clock ticked loudly as the judge finally allowed her to continue. But even then, his interruptions came frequently, as though he was deliberately trying to rattle her. The opposing lawyer joined in, objecting at every opportunity, while the gallery looked on, some smirking, others shaking their heads in pity. Every word she spoke felt like a battle, every argument a test of her resilience. The challenge wasn't just about proving the merits of her case. It was about breaking through the layers of prejudice that had been built around her. She wasn't fighting against one judge or one lawyer. She was standing against an entire system that didn't believe in her, a society that had already decided her worth before she uttered a single word. The judge leaned forward, his expression a mix of impatience and mockery as the teenager began to speak. Her voice was calm but firm, her words precise and deliberate. It was clear she had prepared extensively for this moment, but the weight of the room's judgment loomed over her. Every sentence she uttered was met with skeptical glances from the gallery and thinly veiled smirks from the opposing attorney. As she continued, the judge interrupted her again, his tone dismissive. "You're reciting textbook arguments, young lady. Do you even understand the complexities of this case?" His words were designed to humiliate, but they only seemed to fuel her determination. She paused briefly, meeting his gaze with an intensity that silenced the murmurs in the room. "I understand this case far more than you might assume, Your Honor," she said, her voice unwavering. She pulled out a stack of documents, each meticulously organized and highlighted. With precision, she began to dismantle the opposing counsel's arguments, one point at a time. The room grew quieter as it became evident that she wasn't just parroting legal jargon. She had an in-depth grasp of the case. The opposing attorney, who had initially dismissed her as an amateur, began to shift uncomfortably in his seat. She pointed out inconsistencies in his statements, flaws in his evidence, and outdated precedents he had cited. With every argument she countered, the confidence he had flaunted earlier started to fade. The audience, once entertained by the judge's mockery, was now leaning forward, hanging on to her every word. Despite her composure, the challenges kept coming. The judge, seemingly determined to maintain his authority, continued to cut her off mid-sentence. "You're speaking as if you've been practicing law for decades. Where did you even get this information?" he asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. She didn't flinch. "From the same sources your courts are required to follow, Your Honor. Case law, legal codes, and precedent." She cited landmark cases with ease, her delivery steady and confident. Each citation was accompanied by relevant evidence, which she presented with an expertise that left even seasoned lawyers in the room impressed. The tension in the room shifted. What had started as a spectacle of humiliation was turning into something no one expected. Even the judge, though he tried to maintain his dismissive demeanor, couldn't hide his surprise. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he watched her closely, now more curious than condescending. Her parents, sitting in the back, exchanged glances. The pride in their eyes was unmistakable, but they remained quiet, not wanting to draw attention. They had always believed in her, even when the world doubted her capabilities. Watching her now, standing her ground in a hostile room, was nothing short of extraordinary. The teenager didn't just rely on legal knowledge. She spoke with a conviction that made her arguments resonate on a deeper level. She addressed the judge's prejudice without directly confronting it, using facts and logic to dismantle his biases. Her words carried a quiet strength, as if to say, "I don't need your approval to prove my worth." With each passing minute, the dynamics in the room continued to change. The opposing attorney, now visibly flustered, tried to regain control by throwing complex questions her way. But she anticipated every move, answering with clarity and confidence. The gallery, once filled with whispers of doubt, was now silent, captivated by her brilliance. By the time she finished presenting her argument, the atmosphere in the courtroom had completely transformed. The judge, who had started the session with smug disdain, now regarded her with a mixture of disbelief and reluctant respect. The moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The teenager stood in the center of the courtroom, her shoulders back and her voice steady. The once dismissive audience was now watching with bated breath, hanging on to every word she spoke. It was time to deliver her final argument, the moment that would determine whether she was just a bold young girl or a true legal powerhouse. The opposing attorney, visibly rattled, leaned forward at his desk, clutching his pen like a lifeline. He had underestimated her from the start, and now, for the first time, he appeared uncertain. His previous confidence was replaced with nervous fidgeting as she methodically dissected the final points of his argument. She approached the bench, her eyes fixed on the judge, who looked back at her with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Her tone was clear, deliberate, and unwavering. "Your Honor, the evidence presented by the opposing counsel fails to meet the legal standards required to justify their claim. Not only are their documents incomplete, but their reliance on outdated case law undermines their entire position." The judge raised an eyebrow, as if challenging her. "That's a bold statement for someone your age. Do you have anything to support this claim?" His voice carried a hint of condescension, but it was no longer as sharp as it had been earlier. Without hesitation, she reached for a document from her neatly arranged files. "I anticipated that question, Your Honor. Allow me to direct your attention to case law from the Supreme Court, specifically Smith v. Anderson, which clearly establishes the precedent for cases involving disputed property rights under similar circumstances." She handed the document to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. The courtroom was silent except for the rustling of papers as the judge scanned the document. His expression slowly shifted from skepticism to reluctant acknowledgement. But she wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, the opposing counsel's key piece of evidence, a witness statement from 2 years ago, contradicts the record submitted to this court. If you examine page 14 of Exhibit C, you'll find a timeline that disproves their claim entirely. A collective murmur rippled through the audience. The opposing attorney scrambled through his files, visibly panicked, as he realized she was right. He stood up, attempting to object, but his voice faltered. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The judge cut him off with a raised hand. Counselor, sit down. I'll decide what's relevant. The judge's stern tone silenced the room, and all eyes returned to the teenager, who remained composed, her confidence unwavering. She turned to address the entire courtroom. This isn't just about a legal technicality. It's about fairness and the principle of justice. Dismissing someone because of their appearance, age, or background undermines the very foundation of this court. The evidence I've presented speaks for itself. Justice isn't about assumptions, it's about facts. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Even those who had doubted her found themselves nodding in agreement. The judge leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. The room was so quiet that the faint hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. The final blow came when she revealed a key piece of evidence the opposing attorney had overlooked entirely. Lastly, Your Honor, I have obtained an official statement from the county records office. This document, dated and signed, confirms that the property in question was transferred legally 5 years ago, nullifying all subsequent claims by the opposing party. She handed the document to the bailiff, and the judge examined it carefully. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he exhaled sharply through his nose. Counselor, he addressed the opposing attorney, do you have any rebuttal to this? The attorney shook his head, his face pale. No, Your Honor. The judge turned back to the teenager. For the first time, there was no condescension in his voice. Your arguments are thorough, well-researched, and compelling. I have no further questions. The courtroom erupted in murmurs of astonishment. The teenager's parents, seated in the back, exchanged a glance filled with pride and emotion. She had not just proven her case, she had dismantled the assumptions and prejudices of everyone in the room. As she stood there, victorious, the power of her intellect and determination was undeniable. She had turned a moment of mockery into one of triumph, leaving the courtroom forever changed. The courtroom was forever changed. The teenager's brilliance shattered every prejudice, leaving no room for doubt about her capability. The once dismissive judge now regarded her with respect, while the opposing attorney sat defeated. Her victory wasn't just about the case, it was a triumph over bias and ignorance. As she walked out of the courtroom, her parents' proud smile said it all. She had proven that determination and intelligence could rise above even the harshest judgments. A lesson no one present would forget. If this story inspired you, subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Please note, this is not a real story. It's a work of fiction for education and entertainment only.